The text from my father came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Emma, need you at First National Bank at 2 p.m. Important family matter. Don't be late. I stared at my phone from behind my desk on the 42nd floor of the building I owned in downtown Boston. Outside my window, the Charles River sparkled in the October sun. I was 30 years old and the founder of Hartwell Properties, a commercial real estate investment firm I'd built from scratch over the past 7 years. My portfolio included 23 properties across New England, office buildings, retail spaces, and mixed-use developments. Current portfolio value, $340 million. My personal net worth, $127 million. But my family didn't know that. To them, I was still Emma who works in property management, a title they'd given me 8 years ago when I'd started as an assistant property manager making $38,000 a year. They'd never asked for updates, never shown interest in my career progression, so I'd stopped offering information. My older brother Ryan was the golden child. He'd gone into my father's construction business, married well, and produced 2 grandchildren. I was the disappointing daughter who'd wasted my potential on a boring real estate job. I texted back, "What's this about?" "Just be there. 2 p.m. sharp. First National Bank, main branch. First National Bank." The name rang a bell. I pulled up my property management system and searched. First National Bank occupied the ground floor of Hartwell Tower, a 20-story office building I'd purchased 3 years ago for $47 million. They were my tenants, paying $180,000 monthly in rent. My father had just summoned me to a meeting in a building I owned. This was going to be interesting. I called my director of operations, Michael Torres. "Michael, pull the tenant file for First National Bank. I need everything: lease terms, contact information, current status." "Everything okay?" "My family is having some kind of meeting there at 2 p.m. I want to know who we're dealing with." 20 minutes later, Michael called back. "The bank manager is Gerald Hoffman. He's been there 6 years, solid payment history, no issues." "Want me to sit in on the meeting?"
No.
"But have building security on standby. I have a feeling this is going to go sideways." At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the bank lobby. My father, mother, and brother Ryan were already seated in the waiting area. Ryan's wife, Jessica, was there too, looking uncomfortable. "Emma," Mom stood up, hugging me quickly. "Thank you for coming. This is so important." "What's going on?" "We'll explain inside. The banker is waiting." We were ushered into a conference room where a middle-aged man in a suit greeted us. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, good to see you again." "And this must be Emma?" "Yes," Dad said. "Our daughter. She's here to help with the loan application." "Loan application?" My stomach sank. We all sat down. Gerald Hoffman pulled out a thick file. "So, as we discussed last week, you're applying for a commercial construction loan of $2.4 million to expand your business. However, your current debt-to-income ratio is concerning. You're leveraged at 89%, which exceeds our lending limits." Dad nodded. "That's why we brought Emma. She's going to co-sign and provide additional collateral." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm going to what?" "Co-sign the loan, honey," Mom said, as if this were obvious. "You work in real estate.
You must have some assets."
"We just need you to guarantee the loan, so we can get approved." "We already filled out your information," Ryan added, sliding a document across the table. "We just need your signature." I picked up the document. It was a loan guarantee agreement listing me as the co-signer and guarantor for a $2.4 million construction loan. Below that was a list of collateral properties pledged to secure the loan. My properties. All of them. Hartwell Tower, Boston, $47 million. Commonwealth Plaza, Cambridge, $28 million. Harbor Point Center, Salem, $19 million. Riverside Complex, Worcester, $23 million. They'd listed 4 of my properties as collateral without my knowledge or permission. "Where did you get this information?" I asked quietly. "Public records," Dad said. "Ryan did some research. Found out you own a few properties." We figured you could spare one as collateral. You probably bought them as investments, right? They're just sitting there anyway. Just sitting there? Yeah, Ryan said. It's not like you live in them or anything. They're just investment properties. This way, they actually help the family. Gerald Hoffman cleared his throat. Ms. Hartwell, I should mention that we did our own due diligence on these properties. The ownership records show that I own them outright. I finished all 23 properties in my portfolio. Total value, approximately $340 million. The room went silent. 23. Mom's voice was weak.
Yes.
I own Hartwell Properties, a commercial real estate investment firm. We manage a portfolio of 23 properties across New England valued at $340 million. Dad's face had gone red. That's impossible. You work in property management. I own a property management company. There's a difference. Ryan was staring at his phone, searching frantically. Hartwell Properties. Emma Hartwell, founder and CEO. Holy shit, this is real. Very real. And you tried to pledge my properties as collateral without my knowledge or consent. That's fraud. Build up. I'd grown up in my father's shadow. David Hartwell owned Hartwell Construction, a small general contracting firm that did decent business, but never broke into the big leagues. He'd always dreamed bigger, always talked about expansion, always blamed his limitations on lack of capital. When Ryan joined the business at 23, Dad had been thrilled. Finally, someone to carry on the family legacy. Ryan had become his protege, his golden child, his heir apparent. I'd gone to UMass Amherst and majored in real estate finance. Dad had called it a waste of time. When I'd gotten my first job as an assistant property manager, he'd said, well, at least it's steady work. Not exciting, but steady. What he didn't see was me learning everything: property valuation, lease negotiation, building management, tenant relations. I'd worked 60-hour weeks, saved aggressively, and studied for my real estate broker's license at night. At 23, I'd saved $50,000. I'd used it as a down payment on a distressed retail property in Quincy, bought it for $400,000, renovated it myself, and sold it 18 months later for $680,000. Profit, $210,000 after expenses. I'd rolled that into 2 more properties. Then 4. Then 8. By 26, I'd incorporated Hartwell Properties and purchased my first major asset, a struggling office building in Worcester that I'd bought at auction for $8 million. I'd renovated it, filled the vacancies, and within 2 years it was worth $23 million. My family never noticed. They were too busy celebrating Ryan's mediocre achievements at Dad's construction company. By 30, I'd built a $340 million portfolio. I employed 47 people. I was one of the most successful young commercial real estate investors in New England. And my family thought I was an assistant property manager. Now they tried to pledge my assets without permission to bail out Dad's failing business. Gerald Hoffman was looking at his computer screen, his face pale. Ms. Hartwell, I apologize. I had no idea when they submitted this application that you were, well, that you were our landlord. Your landlord?
Yes.
Hartwell Properties owns this building. We're your tenants. Dad's face went from red to white. We're in your building?
Yes.
Hartwell Tower. I purchased it 3 years ago. First National Bank pays me $180,000 monthly in rent. Mom had started crying. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That I was successful? I tried, Mom. 8 years ago, when I bought my first property, I told you I was starting a real estate investment business. Dad laughed and said I was being unrealistic. Ryan called it a cute hobby. So, I stopped sharing. We thought you'd failed, Ryan said quietly. When you stopped talking about it, we assumed it didn't work out. You assumed wrong. I just stopped wasting energy trying to impress people who'd already decided I was a disappointment. Gerald Hoffman closed the loan file. Mr. Hartwell, given these circumstances, I'm afraid we can't proceed with the loan application. The collateral listed was fraudulently pledged, and your debt-to-income ratio remains unacceptable. Wait, Dad stood up. Emma, you can still help us.
Just cosign.
You have the assets. We're family. You tried to pledge $117 million of my properties without permission. That's not family. That's fraud. We didn't know they were worth that much.
You didn't ask.
You just assumed you could use my assets to cover your bad business decisions. My business isn't bad. I just need capital to expand. I pulled out my phone and opened a financial report. Dad, Hartwell Construction has $3.2 million in revenue and $2.8 million in expenses. Your profit margin is 12%. You're drowning in debt because you keep taking on projects you can't afford, buying equipment you don't need, and living beyond your means. How do you know that? I pulled your financial records when you submitted this loan application with my name on it. As the property owner and your potential creditor, I have the right to see your financials. Ryan stood up. This is insane. You're really going to let Dad's business fail? I'm not letting it fail. He failed it himself. I'm just not going to sacrifice my assets to delay the inevitable. You're a cold-hearted bitch, Jessica said suddenly. She'd been quiet until now.
No.
I'm a businesswoman who won't enable fraud. Revelation. Gerald Hoffman cleared his throat. Ms. Hartwell, given that fraudulent information was submitted on this application, I'm required to report this to our fraud prevention department. I understand. Wait, report what? Dad's voice had gone panicked. You listed collateral you don't own and named a cosigner without their consent. That's loan application fraud. It's a federal crime. We're her family. This is just a misunderstanding. No, I said firmly. This is fraud. You forged my signature on preliminary documents, listed my properties without authorization, and attempted to obtain $2.4 million under false pretenses. Mom was sobbing now. Emma, please. Don't let them report this. Your father could go to prison. Then he shouldn't have committed fraud. We're your parents. You're criminals who happen to be related to me.
My phone rang.
Michael Torres. I answered. Yes. Emma, building security just flagged something. Gerald Hoffman filed an internal fraud report. Do you want me to handle it? No, I'll handle it. But have our attorneys standing by. I hung up and looked at my family. Here's what's going to happen. Gerald will file his fraud report, as required by federal banking regulations. You'll be investigated. Depending on what they find, you may face criminal charges. You can stop this. Dad shouted. No, I can't. And I wouldn't if I could. Why are you doing this? Mom asked through tears. We just needed help. You needed help, so you committed fraud? You could have asked me honestly. You could have explained your situation. Instead, you tried to steal from me. We didn't steal. You pledged $117 million of my assets without permission. That's theft. The fact that you failed doesn't make it less criminal. Ryan's face had hardened. You're going to regret this. The whole family will know what you did. What I did. I built a successful company while you all dismissed my career. The whole family can know that. Gerald Hoffman stood. I think this meeting is over. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, you'll be contacted by our fraud investigation team within 48 hours. I suggest you consult an attorney. Emma, please, Dad said one last time. We're begging you. I stood and gathered my things. You're not begging for help. You're begging me to enable your fraud. The answer is no. I walked out of the conference room, took the elevator to my office on the 42nd floor, and called my attorney. David, my family just tried to fraudulently pledge $117 million of my properties as collateral for a loan. The bank is filing a fraud report. I need you to protect my interests. Are you pressing charges? I looked out my window at the city I'd built my empire in. The city where I'd started with nothing and created something my family had never imagined possible. Yes, I said. I'm pressing charges. Resolution. The investigation took 4 months. Federal banking investigators found that my father had forged my signature on preliminary loan documents, falsified asset declarations, and attempted to fraudulently obtain $2.4 million. Dad was charged with bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Ryan was charged as an accomplice for helping gather the property information and filing the application. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Dad was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Ryan got 2 years. Both were ordered to pay $175,000 in restitution for investigation costs and legal fees. Hartwell Construction filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks after the conviction. The business my father had spent 30 years building was liquidated to pay creditors. My mother never forgave me. She sent one email after the sentencing. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed your father." I replied, "He destroyed himself. I just refused to enable it." The extended family disowned me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all called me heartless, greedy, a traitor. Family friends I'd known since childhood posted on social media about my cruelty. Not one of them acknowledged the fraud. Not one asked if the charges were true. 6 months after the trial, I was featured in Commercial Real Estate Journal. Emma Hartwell, building an empire while fighting family fraud. The article brought new investors and property opportunities. The business community respected someone who enforced ethical standards, even with family. 1 year later, Hartwell Properties expanded to 31 properties valued at $480 million. I was named one of Boston's 40 under 40 business leaders. I received a letter from my father in prison. 8 pages of self-pity and blame. The final paragraph: "You had everything and chose money over family. What kind of daughter does that?" I wrote back one sentence: "The kind who builds something real instead of stealing from others." 2 years after that meeting in the bank, I was invited to speak at MIT's real estate program. I told my story. The family who dismissed my success, the fraud disguised as family obligation, the choice to prosecute. The speech went viral. I received thousands of messages from people who'd been financially exploited by family members. I established the Hartwell Justice Foundation, providing legal aid to family fraud victims and funding financial literacy programs. 3 years later, Gerald Hoffman retired from First National Bank. At his retirement party, held in the building I owned, he pulled me aside. "Emma, I've been in banking for 35 years. I've seen a lot of fraud, but I've never seen someone handle it the way you did, with such clarity and conviction. You did the right thing." It didn't feel right at the time, I admitted. The right thing rarely does. But you showed that ethics matter more than blood. That's rare. 5 years after that mortgage meeting, I stood in my office, looking out at Boston. My portfolio had grown to 42 properties worth $740 million. I employed 93 people. I'd built something real, something lasting, something honest. My family tried to contact me once a year, usually around holidays. I never responded. They'd made their choice when they tried to steal from me. I'd made mine when I chose integrity over enabling criminals. I thought about that loan application sometimes. About Dad's assumption that he could pledge my properties without asking. About Ryan researching my assets to use them for collateral. About their shock when they discovered I wasn't just a property manager. I was a real estate mogul who owned the building they were sitting in. They'd underestimated me my entire life. And when they finally realized their mistake, they tried to exploit me anyway. But I'd learned the most important lesson. Success isn't about family approval. It's about building something you're proud of, with integrity you can defend. My family had neither success nor integrity. They'd had assumptions and entitlement. I had a $740 million portfolio and a clear conscience. Every day, I walked into buildings I owned, managed properties I'd acquired, and employed people who respected my leadership.
That was my family now.
The one I'd built myself. And no one, not my father, not my brother, not anyone, could take that from me.